Yeah, thanks so much for having me, both to CauseMic and also to Accelerate Women, who I originally reached out to for a nav call when I launched my freelance business, saying I am really passionate about impact work. How can I get involved here in Portland? They pointed me to CauseMic, and here we are today. So look at us all working together. So today, altruistic intelligence, how AI can empower nonprofit missions by transforming productivity. A little bit more about me. My background is in applied statistics and data science, and my whole career I've been working in AI, natural language processing, machine learning. Most recently, I was at the Federal Reserve for 5 years, working on a variety of AI and automation solutions. Like Matt said, they have a lot of repetitive legacy age tasks that are not fun and boring and menial and waste everyone's time. So I got to do a lot of work there. And now I've launched my freelance company, Cascadia Solutions, really hoping to have a bigger impact, a more direct impact here in Portland and in the nonprofit and impact-oriented space. So let's get started. Today, we're gonna talk broadly, what is AI? We're gonna break down generative AI. We're gonna talk about ethical AI and then practical AI. So what is AI? Y'all are actually gonna answer first. Nothing fancy, but you can just hold up numbers on your hand. 1, ChatGPT, 2, killer robots, 3, magic, 4, useless, 5, I don't know, and that's why I'm here. If you already know everything, wave really big so I can call on you for questions later. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of 1s, some 3s, 2s, okay, 1, 4. I like it, I'll be looking at you for a lot of the presentation. Awesome, okay, sweet. Well, that gives me a good starting point. And we'll just talk through today's learning objective. So hopefully after this 25, 30 minutes, we'll come away understanding the fundamentals of AI, machine learning, and NLP. We'll learn the impact of AI, how we can be ethical, responsible users, which I assume is very important to all of us in the room today. And lastly, how to boost our productivity. What's in it for me? So, very brief history of AI. We're going to start all the way back in 1805 with the least squares method. That's when this mathematical method was first published. It's a way of fitting basically a linear equation to represent data. So this is kind of the foundation for regression, which you might remember from statistics, predictive analysis, causal analysis. So this is kind of where the math started. Then jump a lot forward. The lines here are not really very even to represent time. But anyways, 1950, the Turing test. Alan Turing wrote this paper talking about the Turing test, which was this concept of can a computer or a machine do a task that a human could do in basically a way where we couldn't tell whether it's the human or whether it's the machine. That's the test, is basically like there's a curtain down, something's being done. Is it a robot? Is it a human? So kind of the conceptual start of artificial intelligence in the 50s. Then go to the 70s, what we call the AI winter. Math and concepts and theories are evolving, but it's not super effective. People aren't really excited. It kind of peters out. Now, fast forward more to the 2010s, 2000s, this is debatable, but this is when kind of deep learning starts blooming. We start getting these other ingredients into the mix that are helping us empower more deep learning, bigger like prediction classification tasks. And these other 2 ingredients are big data and more powerful compute. So we kind of had the math, we had the concepts. Now we have a way to track and get more and more data, and modern age, as this is evolving literally every day, more and more powerful computers to do the math on the data to give us better models. So let's also level set with some general definitions in this nice chart I've made here. So artificial intelligence, the capability of a computational system to perform tasks typically associated with human intelligence, like learning, reasoning, problem solving, perception, decision making. So basically, something a human can do, but the computer's doing it. So a pretty broad definition here. As we can see, it's the biggest bubble. Inside that, we have machine learning, which is really the engine behind a lot of modern AI that we see today. So machine learning is statistical algorithms that can learn from data that they're given, and then they can generalize to new or unseen data. An example of a machine learning model is neural networks, which y'all may or may not have heard about, but that's some of the main models behind the big AI things we have today. Now, natural language processing is a field also inside AI. This is computers processing data encoded in natural language. So language that we speak or think in versus constructed language like computer code, basically language as data, and we'll go through this more. Large language models, I looked over this definition earlier, and it honestly sounds a little inaccessible, but basically large language models are big neural network machine learning models built on language. So when we think of like generative models like ChatGPT, that's in that category, large language models. Then generative AI in general is, again, these could be large language models or other large models that are trained for tasks to produce or generate new things based on the data that they already have. This could be text, images, videos, or other forms of data. So now, jumping into generative AI itself, we're going to go more into the basics of machine learning. So with machine learning, again, big fancy math models. Matt only gave me 30 minutes. We're not doing any actual math today. You're welcome. But basically, we have a large amount of data, and we train the model to make a very generalized representation of this. And we can do this in 3 approaches. One is supervised, where our data is labeled for inputs and outputs. What inputs lead to what output? An example is the spam filter on your email. We have a lot of emails. We know some are spam, some are not spam. We train a model to recognize which is which. We get a new email. It decides to sort it into the spam or the not spam. And honestly, as we know, sometimes these models don't work so great, unfortunately. But that's just one example. Unsupervised, this is no labels. We're just describing the data in general, and that description, those patterns, are going to be our answer. An example of this could be creating customer or donor segmentation. We're looking at all these characteristics of these people, and we're going to segment or cluster them into groups that are similar. The next one is reinforcement learning. This is really kind of on the rise when you think about like what's coming in the future, flying cars and all that stuff. This is a model that's dynamically interacting and updating with inputs kind of live. So we can think of this like, a good example is like a chess bot. So you make a chess move, it knows all it knows about chess, but it's taking your move and all your other moves into consideration to figure out what's the next move, how am I gonna maximize my probability of winning this game, or whatever its reward function is there. And so within machine learning, we have some tasks. We can predict, or given the past data, what's coming in the future. We can classify what category do these things belong in. We could provide recommendations, like Netflix has been using machine learning recommendation models for years. It's like, we know you like these kind of shows. These shows are similar. We think you'd like these ones too. Is the mic still on? Okay. Thanks. All right. Can y'all hear me? No? Okay. I can project, yeah.
One more.
Testing. Yes. Okay, we're back. Yeah. Netflix, recommendation models. Another task, an example is anomaly detection. Given all the data we've seen, what data stands out? Why is it different? This could be an example like fraud detection, or when you get like a text and it's like, did you really make this purchase? That's another machine learning model. So getting down to it, good models need that magic recipe of the math, big data, and those powerful computational resources. And more data equals better representation and more good data. So us here at this HubSpot Summit talking about CRM platforms and tracking our data is all great, and it's going to help lead us to better solutions. Here is a quick visual kind of talking about how more data is better. Let's say that our whole population are these 2 groups. We have the green squares and the red triangles. Sorry if you're colorblind, I just thought about this today. Might be kind of tough to see. But anyways, if we only have the data here on the second side, it's like kind of representative. But let's say our model's job is to segment these 2. It's going to kind of make this diagonal line, which is not exactly where these 2 groups actually diverge. So again, more data, better models. Cool. Natural language processing basics. Remember, language as data. NLP can do a lot of things. We're going to talk about some tasks from simple to more complex to segue us into Gen AI. So some tasks like OCR, or optical character recognition, scanning an image or something that has text and getting it into a digital form. Speech to text, transforming audio into digital text. I use speech to text, practicing this talk So I could go through and find anything I said that was cringe and make sure I don't say it in real life. And y'all can judge if that worked or not. Translation, this is awesome and has opened up so many things, made so many more things possible in this world, just automatically translating things from one language to another. Sentiment analysis, this is determining emotional intent behind text, whether people are saying things negatively, with a positive tone, angry, being sarcastic. And models and technology in this space have really flourished lately. Topic modeling. Let's break some big thing into topics or categories. Like we have a bunch of research papers we want to read, and we maybe don't have time to read all of them. Let's run a topic modeling situation, and we can pick out the main topics and figure out where they are so we know where to look in our big corpus of research papers for what we really want to know. Summarization, producing readable summaries of text. Now we're kind of getting into this like Gen AI transformer LLM model space. Question answering, given a question, what's the correct answer? And then text to image and video. I didn't really put a description there because I think it's pretty self-explanatory. But with machine learning, we have really made a lot of breakthroughs in natural language processing, specifically with word embedding and transformer models. Word embedding is basically building this big, unsupervised, if you remember from the last slide, representation of words and language and token in a way that captures their relationship and context. So we could think of like big feature 3D space, and we have the word dog, and we have the word cat, and then we have the word puppy and the word kitten. Dog and cat are going to relate to each other mathematically in a pretty similar way as puppy and kitten are, and dog and puppy are going to relate similarly as cat and kitten are. But then instead of like 3D space, in models, it's like 1,000 plus D space. It's hard to think about, but it works. Yeah, and so then transformer models kind of take this, and then they add this other layer of attention, which tells us which words are important, which words are not important, given the context, given the query, given the question. That brings us to generative AI as we know it today, which we kind of talked about it before. But these big models where they really understand the relationship between words and text and can do lots of powerful things like question answering, summarization. I like to explain it in this octopus analogy. So let's imagine an octopus found this telegram wire under the ocean, or telegraph wire, not totally sure. Anyways, it's listening to all the dots and dashes that are coming through. There's two people on either side of the ocean. They're sending each other messages, and the octopus is just like picking this up. It's learning. It's so interested. But one day, one of the people takes a vacation, and someone's still sending messages, but they're not getting answered. But the octopus is like, I think I could do this. So they're basically stepping in, and according to all the patterns that they've noticed and learned before, they start sending messages back. So this analogy, though not very realistic, is good for kind of imagining Gen AI. It's not actually smart. It's not a human being. It doesn't, just like the octopus, doesn't know what Morse code is. It doesn't know what the language is that people are talking about, but it can recognize those patterns and can feed us back something based on what it's seen before, but only based on what it's seen before. No prior knowledge of this outside of this magical telegraph wire incident. So scale of generative AI today, I'm gonna go quickly through this, and I made this kind of funny and useless chart for y'all to show the scale at which this is growing even within the last year or two. BERT is a model general purpose transformer built by Google. This was built a couple of years ago. It was trained on 33 billion words and used 1,024 GPUs, which are like big computers, for training it. GPT 3.5, which is an open source GPT model. Right now we're using GPT-4 and like the online version that you're using in ChatGPT. Was trained on 175 billion tokens. You can see that's that. And DeepSeek, which is a newly dropped model, one of the biggest ones making a splash in the industry today, was trained on 14.8 trillion tokens, both in English and Chinese. So, take that as you will with my stupid chart here. But yeah, it actually used less GPUs for training in an effort to save cost, which it kind of didn't if you want to just compare it directly to ChatGPT, but also to save energy which we'll kind of get to when we talk about ethical AI, which is now. Yes. First, let's talk about some examples of adverse outcomes or bad outcomes with AI use. This one happened in 2019. Apple Card used a machine learning algorithm to automatically assign credit limits, and it consistently offered lower limits to women regardless of their creditworthiness. When people complained about this, Apple said, we actually didn't use gender in our model. The model can't even see what your gender is. And this is actually pretty problematic because, one, it was pretty obvious that regardless of the gender thing, the data that they used to train this model was extremely sexist in the first place, and that was showing up in other proxies of the data, like maybe someone's name or where they went to college or other data about them. And then also on the back end, they couldn't measure the outcomes. They couldn't say in our testing, they can't even check, are we being equitable between men and women when we're assigning credit limits? They can't even measure that because the data is not in there. Another one that's happened recently, you might have seen it in the news, National Eating Disorder Association had an AI chatbot on their website and was starting to offer harmful dieting advice, telling people to cut calories and how to diet and eat less. And these people coming to the site are looking to overcome eating disorders, so not the best impact there. And an example of how kind of adoption without guardrails and without proper testing can have negative impact. And overall, this isn't like a specific incident, but several studies have demonstrated AI-powered facial recognition systems have higher error rates when identifying individuals with darker skin tones or women. This could have big consequences in the legal and like jurisdiction space as more technology is being adopted there. And also points to a lot of data bias and data absence for people that aren't necessarily born with privilege or are not white males. So we want to avoid adverse impact. We can break this into social impact and environmental impact. First thing to understand is bias is inherent to AI. Data bias, garbage in, garbage out. Our models only know what we're training it on, and a lot of that can have systemic and year-long history of bias worked into that. So we need to be able to measure, look for that, figure out how to mitigate it. Development bias, bias coming from the practitioners and how they're actually designing these models and systems. Big surprise, about 99% of all the people developing AI models are white men, so you're welcome for me being here. There's like 10 of us, yeah. And interaction bias, so this is bias on the user side. What are you using it for, and how are you using it? So we need to measure bias and test for adverse outcomes. And as users, we must be aware of this inherent bias. We need to screen for anything. We gotta scream. Screen for anything that's harmful or inaccurate, might be a hallucination. And we need to take responsibility for how we use AI. On the environmental side, some of y'all might be aware of this, generative AI models use a very large amount of electricity and water, both for training and for day-to-day model use. Microsoft used about 700,000 liters of fresh water during GPT-3's training, and daily ChatGPT use, daily, of say 100 prompts is equivalent to running your microwave for 15 minutes, charging a laptop 5 times, 1 liter of fresh water, which, honestly doesn't sound that bad. Like, I drink at least 1 liter of water a day, usually, but everyone on the planet using this and corporations using this at large scale, we can really see how that impact can grow. So we'll get into how to use AI more efficiently and more purposefully to be cognizant of these impacts. But first, brief thing on privacy. I can't go without saying this. Do not supply any proprietary sensitive or PII data to any generative AI models. It's unethical and also illegal, so don't do it. Don't put your donor data, your people's names, addresses into any generative AI models. Also, it's best to only supply any strategic, internal, or non-public data when training mode is off. So in ChatGPT, if you go to your settings, data controls, and I'm pointing to a screen you can't see, this little toggle right here, improve the model for everyone, turn that off. ChatGPT is not going to use your model in retraining its model. Basically, when that is turned on, OpenAI now owns the data that you put in there, and they can use it when retraining. They're probably going to encrypt it and promise you that they're going to maintain your privacy, but still, now it's out there. So practical AI, what can we get out of this? Just to kind of level set and put it all together, AI is good at some things and bad at some things right now. It's bad at empathy, compassion, reasoning, judgment, complex problem solving, adaptability, innovation, creativity, tasks it wasn't trained for, and context and data it wasn't trained on. And if you notice, a lot of things in this list that AI is bad at are things that nonprofit employees and stuff are really good at. So we can use AI as a tool to empower us in these more meaningful tasks. And AI is best at, again, data and context it was trained on, tasks it was trained for, things like revision, summarization, automating repeatable tasks, generating starting points for brainstorming, and specific use cases with context, which sounds really non-specific when I say it, but we'll go into some specific examples and research. Yes, so some use cases here that I put together for nonprofits. I've broken these into general solutions, custom solutions. First is content generation. I'm going to add some grant writing here from our other last question, our last session. But things like thank you notes, newsletters, social media, general outreach, content generation, I know takes a long time and a lot of effort, and AI can really help kind of boost our productivity in that thing. We can also use it for meeting productivity, doing meeting transcription, notes, and summarization. There's lots of free softwares out there that do a great job at this. Brainstorming, getting ideas for events, volunteer engagement, digital strategy, things like market research. ChatGPT can do a pretty good SWOT analysis for you, and simple data analytics, things where, nothing too complicated, but we're going to talk about an example later on some general revenue analysis. So there's also custom solutions. You could partner with someone like me at Cascadia Solutions, or maybe other more specific vendors. We're also going to talk about what HubSpot offers with their platform, but things like more intense data analysis, social impact reporting, or just measuring impact in general, program evaluation, also automating routine tasks, data entry, scheduling meetings, marketing content, surveys, things that aren't, super fun, but, are kind of specific and do need some know-how from subject matter experts in your organization. Personalized donor marketing, predicting donor gifts, we could segment donors, prioritizing best prospects. It was really cool to hear from Virtuous and some of the other talks yesterday on how tools are already building in products and features like this, and website chatbots that we were talking about earlier. I know HubSpot offers a service to help you get one of those set up too. But yeah, let's talk about effective prompt generation. Let's actually go home with some skills we can use today. So some 3 basic tenets. First is clarity and conciseness. Prompts need to be direct and precise to avoid ambiguity that could lead to inaccurate responses. Again, these generative models have so much data that they're referencing. If you ask them something general, you're going to get something really general. Contextual depth, so providing sufficient context to help the model understand the prompt better and leading to that more precise output, which really feeds into intended outcomes. So clearly defining what you're expecting as a result, whether it's creating text or images, you want something summarized, information for research, et cetera. So here's some examples of some well-engineered prompts. Sorry, this is so small. Instead of, let's say, write a post about technology, a better prompt would be write a 500-word blog post discussing the impact of artificial intelligence on modern nonprofits, focusing on social outcomes and revenue growth. Way more specific, way more targeted. We've talked about how long we want it to be and what we want it to focus on. We could even take this a step further and add some context. Say, write a 500-word blog post for an audience of this demographic in this part of the country to help target it further. Another example here, instead of analyze revenue data, we could say, use Python to analyze 2020 to 2022 revenue data from the attached spreadsheet. We want to summarize trends and monthly revenue growth and summarize yearly metrics for an annual report. So again, really specific, talking about the intended outcome and what kind of things you want. So some pitfalls to avoid here, like we've been discussing, something that's overly broad or vague. This is going to result in broad and vague responses. And also just assuming that AI understands the implicit context or references that you're coming from. So AI doesn't know that you work in a nonprofit and that your mission is X and your donors and volunteers are Y. So adding that in can really help. And some advanced prompt engineering techniques, I feel like I could give like a whole presentation just on this, but just to scratch the surface, incorporating techniques like few-shot learning. So by providing actual examples of work that you've done in the past that illustrate your tone, message, and good examples there can really help get you that outcome that you're looking for, as well as using iterative refinement. So, we go with a prompt, we get a response, but let's improve that by asking more prompts or asking to refine certain parts, add certain things, take things away, can get us to a better outcome. Cool. Now to touch on HubSpot's AI features. I know after this we're going to do kind of a demo and workshop on HubSpot stuff. Also, I'm sure the HubSpot people here could tell you a lot more in depth about this. But they have a lot of exciting features, and one is their AI for Business product. It has AI-assisted copywriting. It'll help you generate emails and can help you build a chatbot for your personal website. And then on their customer platform, these built-in features, they have summarization, a search grader, content writer, and Breeze Copilot, which along with some of these other Breeze agents are in the beta stage now, but I believe some of y'all can get access to them. But Breeze Copilot is going to be like an interactive assistant kind of in a chat window that can help you automate tasks and kind of interact with some of the other functionalities in HubSpot. Then there's going to be some other agents on the way in the content, social media, prospecting, and customer segments for those agents. Again, I'm not the expert here, but would love to learn more, and I'm excited for y'all to explore this as you use HubSpot. So, conclusion. Bringing it all together, big takeaway is keep your eyes out for use cases and also track your data well. And as we're here at the CRM platform, that's really setting us up for that step there. But yeah, let's recognize tasks and processes that cost you time, those menial, boring, not fun, don't require much thought tasks someone with maybe minimal training can do. That is a great spot to start when we're thinking of use cases for AI. Things like reading through a bunch of survey results to summarize some takeaways, writing a bunch of personalized thank you notes, which was an example we just heard about in the last talk, entering data from handouts and clipboards and things into spreadsheets, creating social media content across multiple platforms for different audiences. We can also think of more big picture questions that we can use or use our data to answer. So how could I measure the value add of my content strategy? Which donors are going to have the most capacity in the next 3 months for my big ask? What's the most impactful way to engage this volunteer? And maybe in the big picture, if we spent less time on Y and more time on X next year, what might we be able to expect in our outcomes? We can also think even bigger than this on our actual causes and our mission and like getting down to the root of the issue. So yeah, tying it all together, keep your eye out for those use cases. Like Matt said, AI isn't going anywhere. It's essential and kind of a non-negotiable for people in this world and in this space to engage and strategize. So thanks. Again, I'm Addie Olson with Cascadia Solutions. Would love to connect with y'all here or afterwards. Add me on LinkedIn. And yeah, open to questions.
Okay, I'm going to kick us off.
Yes.
So something that I've seen, particularly with HubSpot, is when I'm using Sales Hub and I'm creating a template. The template that I talked about earlier when I was talking about how to build a major gift program with it, it prompts me and it says, hey, here's some suggested changes to your email in order to make it more effective. It might say, you may want to ask a question, you may want to shorten this. It's giving me different examples like that. And something that I've experienced is I've been training ChatGPT. I've loaded a bunch of content up that
awesome.
I've personally written, and I've tried to really customize that. And just recently, in the last 2 weeks, I started to see how people were reacting to the content that I was putting out there. So for example, to come to the Nonprofit HubSpot Summit, I did a sequence with lots of different emails. And I actually said to ChatGPT, these emails got a better response than these emails. Like, can you tell me why that is? And something that was really interesting is it said, which of these two responses do you prefer? And it really kind of like began to analyze like the why behind this. And I think I'm the question that I'm eventually getting to is you know, when you think about how to really interact with AI and how to take it to like the next level, where do you recommend we start?
Wow, okay, that's a big question. Very excited to hear about like your experience and kind of journey, especially with your kind of like you were saying, like bringing in your actual data to help like train and give it a good example. But yeah, like getting to that next level, like you just did, great example is starting with your data, starting with data in the past. Again, ChatGPT is not built for nonprofits doing donor marketing. You know, it is this very general purpose thing. So bringing in examples of data and text and blog posts and research that really speak to you and your mission, and providing those as examples is a great way to get started. Again, like that iterative prompting of, you know, taking one thing, editing it a little bit, asking for improvements is really gonna help too. And again, I think I'm not just trying to pitch myself, but really to get to the next step would kind of be to build a custom solution. Like, again, this works great for really specific use cases, but we can do what's called transfer learning, where we take a big general purpose model like ChatGPT and we fine tune it on data that's super relevant for this task, and then basically task it with, you know, kind of just that specific output that we're looking for.
This is why we spent 3 hours on the phone, I'm realizing, together. I was so excited about what the possibility and what's coming and how to adapt. Okay, we have time for a couple of questions. Does anybody have any?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I can speak from experience here. I've done a project with the Fed where we experimented on exactly this. We also experimented on not using a large language model and basically just building our own model from scratch, just based on the documents we wanted to look at. We did an experiment using 50 documents, we did one using 100 and one using 500, and we were still able to get pretty great results just from the 50 document sample over just kind of our control thing. And again, like there's a lot of like math and parameters and stuff that goes into this fine tuning, but we were very surprised with the results, even with just a small amount of data in that extra fine tuning layer. Yeah, and you brought up overfitting. That's definitely important and something to be aware of. Overfitting is this concept of making a math model that's like almost too specific to our data, so it's not good at generalizing outside of it, or kind of like thinking about what's in the future or next or outside of the context we give it.
Thanks. So I've been using a little bit of AI for help with grant writing, grant research particularly, and we had this huge ask from the county for dollars. I wrote one proposal on our own, okay, and it was graded pretty low. So, but there were others in that same proposal or that same project that were graded pretty high. So when the next project came around, I then did a public information request, got those proposals that were successful, took the most successful one, took our information and information from and plugged in a link to the funder, and said, you know, give me a draft of, and these were specific questions that were asked, and many of them were redundant, which was making it really hard for me to go back and look at what language I had used. So I did it one question at a time. And it was really extremely helpful in terms of incorporating the essential language from the successful proposal and merging our language and using some of the language, because that's the instruction I gave it, using some of the essential language from the site of the funder. And so aggregating that information, pulling it into a draft was really pretty effective. And obviously it was a draft. So it took quite a bit of time to go through the draft and refine it, plug in certain things, but it really gave me a huge start, and it really was a way for me to avoid those redundancies and all of those particular questions. Don't know how successful it's going to be yet, because we haven't gotten word back on the funding, but we got high marks at least when I had it looked at by other folks that knew what they were doing. So that was just one example. I mean, is there anything else that you might recommend that might have enhanced that particular approach?
Yeah, I was going to say, great story. Thanks for sharing. Excited to hear how that turns out for you. I think that's an awesome approach. Like I mentioned here, again, using some of these general use models, it's really good at, like you were saying, making a draft and getting us to that starting point. Nothing is going to totally replace us, and the heart and passion that we want to put into writing a grant and really communicating where we're at there. But with your question on things that you could have done differently, one thing I would have been interested to see is, what if I used a different generative AI model? So maybe you use ChatGPT. What if I repeated that process with Claude and saw how those were different? Maybe it just gave me a few new ideas or a few new things to brainstorm, but that's maybe one other thing that I would try in that process. Again, a lot of these companies are kind of keeping their sauce a little bit secret for the models that are in production right now. A lot of them have open sourced some of their past models, but it's different approaches and different attempts at kind of solving this similar issue. So maybe trying a different vendor there might have given you more ideas or more context.
I like too that you mentioned you went question by question. I definitely have found that when I break things up more, and it's interesting, the more direct, like the shorter in terms of like what it is that we're working through, the better the outcome, in my opinion. So that's been really helpful, like letting it know even, I'm planning to do this and I'm gonna feed you this, are you ready? So that it doesn't start going down a path I don't want it to go, and then I kind of go piece by piece. So it's interesting that you had the same experience by like breaking it up through individual questions. It does better. It gives us something to still do for just a few more minutes too, which is nice. Okay.
It's like email. You put more than 3 things in an email, people don't read them.
Exactly, yeah.
All right, Riley, you got a question?
I do.
All right, we'll give it to you.
My question is about workflow and content generation. One thing that we've noticed, I'm sure everyone else has, is the internet is now full of slop, of like basically just extremely generic writing, because the marginal cost of that has dropped to 0. And what's something we're really trying to do is stand out from that with being weirder, clearer, more distinctive. And when we look to try to layer this into, it's so hard because the people who are reviewing the drafts always make them more generic. Which is just, that's what editing looks like.
Definitely.
And the weirdness, in my experience, has to come from that first drafter. Like if they go gas pedal all the way down, and the editor is the one who pumps the brakes on various stuff and says that you can't say cringe in an email. My question is, where would you see layering Gen AI onto that workflow that won't just make it super generic?
Yeah, that's a great question, and also a great point. I think we've all seen like our fair share of totally generic LinkedIn posts, and we're like, okay, this says nothing. You didn't read this article. Why are there so many emojis and dashes in this? But yeah, that's a great point to point out that that initial like creativity, that wittiness, that funniness is coming from your initial copywriter. And I think generative AI can be a good step in like that editing and revision process, especially if you can share that outcome or that intended audience. Like, here is our Instagram caption. We want it to be witty. We want it to be relevant to millennials like Addie or whatever. And, actually tell it that context and add that in. And then, can go through the editing team or, the final revision and go there. But I say, definitely like hold on to that creativity and that intention at the beginning, and then use that in your prompt for revision or for brainstorming.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Thanks.